Big Play Detroit. I am Chris Castellani, and we have officially, first of all, Austin is here, our co-host and producer. My apologies, my man. Welcome aboard. It is officially that time of the year, and we were wondering when it was going to come, and in fairness to the organization, the last few years, it was relatively deep into the season, even into October, before this particular moment came. But I think it's here now, and it's officially football season. And we are going to talk some football here today, but the reality has started to set in. The Detroit Tigers aren't going anywhere this season. Hell, they go 30 – I don't think they even have 40 games left, but they have gone some hot streak. You're welcome to dig this up. I know the American League is awful. As of the time in which we're recording this, they're currently losing a game in which Farmer Valdez is pitching, which lately feels like an automatic loss when he takes the mound. That's where we're going to start today, and we'll do a post-mortem at the end of the season. But Detroit – here's the truth, guys. When I saw it by June, July that Detroit was starting to heat up, I got my hopes back up. I think we all did. And it was a combination of things. It was the team playing a lot better for a while. It was about a solid 2 months of them being one of the best teams in the American League, right? And then, we see what the American League looks like, the standings. They're within striking distance, whether it's the wild card or the division. And even after they got swept by the White Sox, I was still like, okay, that's weird. But if you remove that series, which you can't, this has still been one of the best teams in baseball for the last 2 months. And I honestly thought, at worst, they were going to sneak into the playoffs, maybe even win the division. That all changed in that ninth inning against Pittsburgh last week. They had a 3-2 lead going into the last frame. Kenley strikes out the first guy, ends up giving up 2 home runs. The Tigers not only lose that game, they get swept by a bad Royals team. I know they've been playing well lately, but a bad Kansas City team on the road, currently losing to Tampa. And guess what? Their next series is 3-game set at home against the Dodgers with Skubal pitching, so I think we have an idea of how that's going to go. Right. This is the comparison I always make, and I think I've probably made it maybe even on this show before, but I've always found it fascinating. There's certain instances where you can keep taking hits, but sometimes that one game / that one hit is just the one that you don't recover from. I always use this analogy. Peyton Manning, I know, has talked about this, and people that grew up on Peyton Manning like we did, regular season-wise, prior to Aaron Rodgers, and even then it's debatable, probably the greatest regular season quarterback of all time, right? And was great for so long. Missed an entire year with a neck injury. Goes to Denver. He's brilliant. Wins the MVP in 2013, was playing great in 2014, and admitted there was a game in the middle of 2014 against the Rams back when they were in St. Louis, where he talked about the fact that he took some hits, and for some reason after that game, he just had a harder time recovering from them. And immediately after that game, the numbers dipped. I know they won the Super Bowl in 2015, but the point I'm trying to make is that there comes a certain point where you take that one hit. You lose that one game, and the mojo just goes away. This team, despite all their noticeable flaws, was playing really good baseball for about 2 months with a terrible bullpen, and with the starters that they traded away, and with the injuries they had. What I'm watching now, is it a team that I think is quit? No, there's too much youthfulness on this team, and this is where I do believe in AJ as a manager. Like, I don't think that this is an organization or a team that's going to quit. I think it's a team that's defeated. I think that when this is a group, and it's a psychological thing, to an extent, and I get it. These guys are human. But you look at the way this season has gone, every guy in that clubhouse came into this season thinking that this was going to be the team that won the American League Central, maybe even went further. And look at the number of things that have happened. Verlander goes down early. Skubal gets traded. Mize gets traded. Your bullpen is just blowing chunks. I mean, it's a national story how terrible this bullpen is. So mathematically, I'm not going to say anything completely, I'm not going to say that anything's impossible. I know how weird and bipolar this team has been, but it's very clear to me, and I've heard from multiple people that are consistently going to the park, that the vibe is different over the last few weeks, especially over the last week or so since they had that big slide. When you are a team that is 16 games under 500 in the month of May, or at the end of May, you can't afford to really have a stretch like what this team has had over the last week. And now they find themselves, while not out of it, in position where it would essentially take a miracle. And that's we'll do the postmortem at some point, but you point to the players. You point to this bullpen. You point to, fundamental mistakes and ability to finish innings. It's a lot, but that's where I stand on Austin. This isn't necessarily the burial, but I think we're definitely prepping arrangements for the funeral. Is that basically where you're at this point?
Yeah, 100%. I'm somebody who was throughout the entire season, even after the month of May, was essentially saying, 162 game season. Let's see what they do. This team has been bipolar over the last couple of years where they just go on insane stretches. And they did that. And they, kept fighting and giving us reasons to think that, they might squeak into the playoffs. They might be able to hold on to Skubal and Mize. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. But like you said, they couldn't really afford to have a slide like they just did. And, mathematically, they're still in it for, just making the postseason and even winning the division. But there's practically no chance of that happening. So you're pretty much keying in on that third wild card spot right now. And, again, they would have to go on a really hot stretch and beat out some good teams. Like you said, they've got the Dodgers coming up. It's not looking good at all. And I'm pretty much at the point where I'm ready to write them off. But who knows? Maybe they'll prove me wrong. But this has been, I don't think there's a debate, the most disappointing Tiger season I can recall in my lifetime. You could bring up 2008 or 2009 because they collapsed in 2009, lost that game 163, and they were a World Series favorite going into 2008 and missed the playoffs completely. But when you look at this season, you're calling up McGonigal, you're calling up Clark. Dingler's having, until recently, an MVP caliber campaign. You've got Skubal. The division looked like it was ours for the taking. You bring Verlander back. You signed Framber Valdez. It looked like this was the year, or this was Scott Harris's version of going for it. And so far, it just has not panned out. Hopefully they can salvage something to at least say, we made it to the postseason. We were playing for something. But even if they do that, I think that this offseason, a lot of changes are going to be made. I don't think Harris is going anywhere. I don't think Hinch is going anywhere, for as much as some people might want that to be the case. But when you look at guys like Torkelson or whoever you want to look at, I think there's going to be a lot of moves made. Scott Harris is going to be bringing up all of his guys that he's drafted and developed and all of that. And largely the story of this season, unfortunately, is the bullpen. They were not able to construct a good enough bullpen. It has been historically one of the worst bullpens, at least this century. I don't know how further back that would go, but we look to all of those Dombrowski bullpens and how they've blown things or whatever. But if we'd even gone 500 in those games where our bullpen had blown games, we'd probably still have Tarik Skubal and Casey Mize on this team. And some of the stats and data that's come out about how bad this bullpen has just been insane. So that is going to be a critical focus for Scott Harris in the offseason. And it's too bad he didn't recognize that coming into this season, because it could have changed literally everything. But so I think we're going to see a lot of changes going into next year. They still have a chance to play for something, but signs are not looking good.
Yeah, and I think that this is something that requires a very measured conversation like what we're having, because as is often the case on social media, either Scott Harris is doing great and everything's fine and they've just been unlucky, or Scott Harris is the worst thing ever and he's responsible for all their failures. The truth does lie somewhere in the middle. There has been some bad luck with this team. There has been some unfortunate things that have gone down that nobody really expected. At the same time, I think that they believed in certain things in regards, especially when it comes to the philosophy of their bullpen arms, that didn't really work last year, and it sure as heck hasn't worked this year, and we'll talk more about it once the season inevitably concludes. So we're going to be back in segment number 2. We're actually going to do a little bit of Red Wings talk, and I'll take this one just because I want to just put the question out there for people about whether or not they find this whole thing as bizarre as I do. We're going to discuss some puck when we return. All right, we're back. Segment number 2 here, Big Play Detroit. I want to talk a little bit of hockey news because, look, we've talked about the big stories, right, over this summer. Dylan Larkin, let's start there. Dylan Larkin requested trade. He has not been traded. It has been months. Steve Yzerman, largely the reason why Larkin requested a trade, no longer the GM of the team. It's one of those, you're not fired, we're just moving positions, but it was a quiet firing, essentially. Okay, I think that how we all felt when that happened was at least these issues are going to be resolved at some point. It has been the better part of 2 months. The Red Wings still have Dylan Larkin. The Red Wings still don't have a GM. And a story that came out this week is that one of the guys who's in the running to potentially be GM for the Red Wings is Jeff Greenberg. If you've heard that name, it's because he's the GM for the Tigers. Now, I will say this in their defense. He does have some hockey experience, right? He did come from the Blackhawks organization, didn't spend a whole lot of time there, but I just think it goes to show the dysfunction that currently exists within this organization, and no disrespect, but this isn't the Lions, okay? It's not even the Pistons who won a long time being, but this is one of the biggest brands in all of hockey, and the fact that, like, on NHL websites, national sites are talking about the fact of, like, what in the world is going on in Detroit? Because I think at the very least when I saw Larkin wanted to be traded, when I saw Stevie Y was gone, I at least said to myself, this allows you the opportunity to reset without having to make an excuse. You can say, you know what? We went through the Yzer plan. We went through this era. It didn't work. Yzerman's gone. Larkin, hey, did some good things here, was a captain here. He's unhappy, never been to the playoffs. Let's trade him. Now, I feel like you're kind of in the worst place possible, which is you're in this bizarre in-between where it looks like Larkin is going to stay. It looks like he's going to show up to camp and go to work. I'll be honest, and I'm not in the locker room. I don't know how the players are going to respond to that. And I don't know how the organization is going to respond to that, because you had a guy who was, as much as a guy like Dylan Larkin can be, pretty unhappy with the situation. There had been not so subtle shots taken when Steve Yzerman was here regarding his handling of certain situations, especially trade deadlines. I don't know if this is a situation where the Red Wings felt we got to choose one or the other and we're going to stick with Dylan Larkin, but it's a strange position to be in. To me, it's like if Skubal was still here after all the trade talk. Hey, we're gonna ship him out. We're gonna trade him. The Dodgers. Oh wait, guess what? He's still here. It's just kind of awkward for everybody, and that would all be somewhat explainable or somewhat understandable if you had a guy in charge who was pulling the strings. You don't. You have an empty seat at your GM position right now, and so I'm baffled by this, and I think it just goes to show that you live long enough, you exist on a long enough timeline, you watch sports long enough, eventually you're going to see every great empire start to crumble, and that doesn't mean the Red Wings can't get it back. This isn't going to be the beginning of a 50-year drought, which the Red Wings are either not making the playoffs or losing in the first round of the playoffs, but it is surprising to me that for an era that was kind of teetering towards failure for a while, that Detroit had no built-in plan B. Like, if you're going to tell Steve Yzerman it's time to move on, I think that's great. The numbers speak for themselves. You haven't been to the playoffs. You haven't won a playoff game. But for them to be so far removed from that announcement, and we're just here, still waiting, and the draft is passed, and now we're coming out of a point where, like, we're on the verge of the regular season, and there's no GM, that's the kind of stuff that shouldn't happen here. And is it salvageable? Of course it's still salvageable, but we're going to remember the fact that this team literally went months in search of a GM, and one of the only names that I've heard come up that has made any noise has been a guy who's currently working for your baseball team. It's just a very bizarre situation. I don't have much more substance to add to it other than to say it's not nearly what I expected from the Detroit Red Wings really at any point in my life, given the consistency they had. But times they are a change. All right. We'll be back segment number 3. We're going to talk both college and pro, technically, as it was announced that a former Michigan State player is returning to college in basketball, and potentially even a Michigan player as well. Austin, I want to get your thoughts on it. We'll return in segment number 3. All right, segment number 3, we're back. It is Big Play Detroit. So I'm going to plead a little bit of ignorance here because anytime I hear a judge filed or a judge ruled in regards to anything basketball or NCAA related, I don't even want to finish reading it. Okay, that's just, what are we doing? Like, this is not something that I'm that interested in. I want to talk about sports, but this is undeniable. There was a ruling that players who arrived in the 2022 season were granted a fifth year of eligibility in the NCAA. I'm not completely sure why. This was past COVID, but this impacted certain people. One of those people who it impacted was Jackson Kohler. Jackson Kohler was a part of, I believe, the Utah Jazz organization at this point, played a little bit in the G League, but now you've had multiple players, both college basketball and college football, who are going back to college. Sounds like the beginning of a sitcom, and Jackson Kohler is one of them. Kohler announced that he is going to BYU for his fifth, and I shouldn't say final, because at this point eligibility is just a myth. Screw it, he might be here for 10 years, but I believe it'll be his final year in college. And I want to get your thoughts on Austin and just say, look, none of my frustrations with this has anything to do with Jackson Kohler. We both like Jackson Kohler. Austin, we talked to his dad in the past. We had him on Chris and Company. Wonderful guy, great career at Michigan State. I don't believe there's any Michigan State fan right now who feels any sort of angst. The guy played 4 years at Michigan State at a time in which nobody plays 4 years. He was incredibly loyal to the university. But where it gets a little bit muddy is the fact that there was a possibility that Izzo could have swooped in and said, hey, here's X amount of money. We can take his scholarship away. This guy can be a walk-on. We add you back to the roster. He didn't want to do that. Izzo has obviously preached loyalty. Michigan State fans seem to be generally happy with that. I'm not going to go on this diatribe yet, but I sort of roll my eyes at the moral grandstanding. Like, the goal of this sport needs to be to put the best roster together. I don't, if people's feelings are getting hurt, I don't know. Like, I don't think you're going to win a national championship doing that. I'm sorry. Still an elite coach. That's conversation for another day. But as I said with the Red Wings, weird. This is all just so weird. And I want to get your perspective on it, Austin, because you obviously being a Spartan fan, I know you, and I know that there isn't any angst towards Kohler, but are you happy with the way Izzo handled this? Because it's undeniable that a fifth-year starter, I don't know if he didn't start all 5 years, but a fifth-year player, especially one of Jackson Kohler's talents, who was a good shooter and good rebounder and a good defender towards the end of last season especially, makes what is already going to be a good Michigan State team a heck of a lot better. Do you wish they would have been more aggressive with their pursuit of him, or do you feel like it was acceptable?
Yeah, I'm with you on, kind of where I think Tom Izzo is on this. Like, I wish that they would have done whatever they can to bring Jackson Kohler back, because they have a great recruiting class coming in. They have some key players returning. They're going to be a top 10 team in the country all season long, and they're going to have a chance to play for something special. And you add Jackson Kohler to that, that just elevates the ceiling even further. Jackson Kohler is the epitome of what Tom Izzo wants Michigan State players to be. Be there all 4 years, be loyal, work hard, be a leader on that team. And so, had the timing worked out better, I definitely think that Tom Izzo would have brought him back. And I think it's really unfortunate that this ruling comes about, after Jackson Kohler had already spent the summer in the summer league or whatever they do for the NBA. Otherwise, I think the situation could have been different. And as a Michigan State fan, I love how loyal Tom Izzo is to his guys, and just, his morality and his ethics and how he goes about things. But because of that, that also then, comes around to bite you in the ass at times. And this is one of those times. And especially in this age of college sports, where you can pay players to go wherever, if you want to bring them in, you can just pay players or offer NIL deals or whatever. Having that backbone, that moral backbone, is going to be harder and harder to stay true to your values and also compete at the highest level. And to Izzo's credit, he's continued to do that, but also Michigan State fans have been waiting around forever, and I know he definitely has too. to win his second national title. And this year is going to be one of those years where he has a chance to do that. And I know one thing that Michigan State fans were upset about is the fact that apparently a couple months ago or so, or maybe a month ago, I don't know, Tom Izzo granted that final roster spot to a former manager. So it's not even an actual player. I've heard he's played in high school and all that, but a guy that's not going to get any time on the court or play any meaningful minutes. And I think it's a nice gesture for Tom to do that. And I think it's nice of him to, be loyal to him and not, retract that after the fact. But as you said, in this day and age, you got to build the best roster to win. That's what Dusty May just did. His roster last year was almost completely different than it was the year before. And he won a national title, one of the best teams we've seen this century. So think it's really unfortunate in the timing of it all, because I knew this was a possibility. Carson Cooper even talked about potentially coming back if they were granted that fifth year. And it just didn't work out. But in terms of college sports on the whole, I just heard something like a guy who's played in the NFL is now going to be coming back to play in college and is the first guy to do that. And, for guys like Jackson Kohler, being granted a fifth year and, he only played in the summer league and I don't think he was drafted. Like, I think that's valid. I think that's fair. I think there should be room for flexibility. But we're getting to the point where you're going to have like 30-year-old former professional players playing college sports. And that's a line that's just, I think so many of us think is just absolutely ridiculous. So it's getting harder and harder for me to follow college sports and understand everything that's going on. Like, I love sports. I can watch them, the competitive nature of it, but this whole business side and everything they're doing with NIL and the transfer portal and eligibility, like it's getting hard for me to follow all that. So hopefully they can work some things out, but I don't think anyone thinks this is good for the game.
I agree. I just want to make two more points and say that in defense of Tom Izzo here, BYU over the last few years has proven themselves to be a program that has a lot of money. I mean, the number one draft pick literally just came out of BYU, and they've committed to having like a legit, and they've been good for a while, but really committed to spending and bringing some guys on. So, there's a chance that maybe they offered them something Michigan State couldn't have. I mean, quite frankly, who knows if this maybe was going to end this way regardless. Secondly, I just want to make one point because you brought up Michigan as well. It hasn't been decided, but Michigan's trying to bring Roddy Gale back. And that, again, the word is weird because I think of Roddy and I think of his legacy. I mean, literally the last guy to touch the ball in the national championship season, throwing it ahead. Like, it seemed like that was a closed book. And now it's like, hey, he might be back. So it is all strange, and we'll have many more segments about it, I'm sure, or stuff like this in the future. But when we return, it is going to be time for our All Say This segment. That will be Austin running point on that one, and then I will take Fact or Fiction. So we will return in segment number 4. Segment number 4, we are halfway there. Austin Sisler joining me, Chris Castellani here on Big Play Detroit. Austin, it's your turn to talk about whatever the heck you want. It is our I'll Say This segment. I'll leave it to you. Take it away.
I'll say this. ESPN sucks now. And I think pretty much anyone like our age or older would probably agree with this. But like when I think back to my childhood, I would get up every morning before school. I would flip on SportsCenter. I would eat my breakfast. I would see quick highlights of all the games that I missed, quick headlines of like the most important stories in sports for sports that I don't even follow. Like, I'm not a big golf guy, but of course you'd see things about Tiger Woods or whatever is going on. And like that helps me keep my finger on the pulse of, guys around the league. Like, I'm a huge baseball fan. It would allow me to see what's going on in the West Coast, become fans of guys that, I weren't part of my team or anything, and at least know what's going on in other sports. These days, I pretty much have to play fantasy sports to kind of keep track of everything that's going on around the league. And other sports that I'm not really a fan of, I have no idea what the heck is going on in that, because ESPN has largely become just a podcast. Every single show is basically a podcast. You've got like terrible former quarterbacks giving their opinions about things, talking with guys who get paid millions and millions of dollars to act like absolute clowns on TV. And it's pretty much just that on loop. And, there is a space for that. Obviously, it gets clicks and it gets attention to, you want to open up the floor for like actual debates and things. But I think so many of us miss the days where you can just quickly watch sports highlights, see what's going on, hear the news. And I mean, obviously, we're all tapped in now with, the world at our fingertips. But there was something that was really enjoyable and nice about that time. And these days, like, I hardly ever find myself flipping ESPN on anymore, unless there's an actual game that they're broadcasting. So yeah, that's my take on that.
Generally, I agree, and I think that this has been something that's been discussed quite a bit, especially, I mean, dude, I swear to God, once a year I hear about massive layoffs at ESPN, which stinks. You don't want to see anybody lose your job. I think that the beginning of this was the fact that when you and I were growing up, Austin, like, stuff like Twitter didn't really exist yet, and social media was not what it was today. So if you wanted to get caught up on what happened in baseball and basketball and the NFL, like, you went to ESPN. And the fact is, the personalities like Chris Berman and Tom Jackson, these guys doing the recaps of the NFL games, they made things really fun, and it was an engaging way of getting caught up. Now, highlights get posted directly to Twitter whether you have a TV package or not. You can see this stuff almost in real time. There was no NFL Red Zone back then. And then secondly, I think ultimately what happened is that ESPN, they spent a ton of money getting the TV rights deals to a bunch of sporting events, which I'm sure, probably makes them a lot of money. But in turn, they sacrificed the one thing that people liked about those, or, the heyday of SportsCenter, which is the personalities. The people can crap on McAfee and Stephen A. all they want, and I'm not going to say that there isn't a level of overexposure there, but both of those guys are big personalities, and the only two standouts really that still exist on that network, along with Scott Van Pelt, who I feel like is generally the exception to all this. I feel like everybody kind of likes SVP. But, dude, I see SVP on other podcasts for other shows all the time. Like, I think he's kind of aware of the sinking ship that's there. So, to me, it's kind of sad because I don't – it's not a personal beef, but as sports media has expanded, ESPN, it feels like, has not been able to adjust. Still going to watch games that are on ESPN. But, yeah, it's been – easily more than a decade since I tuned into an episode of SportsCenter, which is something crazy to think about going back over the last, if you would have asked me this 15, 20 years ago. So when we return, I do want to talk some Michigan football. We're going to end with some college football talk because I want to go back to Bryce Underwood, and I don't mean to do this every single week, but there is a topic I want to discuss in segment number 5 here that I think is interesting. It's something I tweeted out last week. We'll be right back. All right, segment number 5, it is time for our fact or fiction segment. And I teased this last week because I tweeted it out, but now I want to discuss it in more detail. That's one of the big reasons why I like doing this show. Fact or fiction? The Week 2 game against Oklahoma is more important to Bryce Underwood than it is to Michigan's team. Now, I got some pushback for tweeting this because people said that's insane. No individual is more important than the team itself. That's crazy. But hear me out, okay? I'm going to throw out 2 hypothetical scenarios here, okay? Scenario number 1. Now, first of all, in an ideal world, Michigan beats Oklahoma and Bryce Underwood plays really well and we aren't having this conversation. So hopefully we get the best of both worlds. But scenario number 1, Michigan plays Oklahoma and wins a rock fight. It's what the Ohio State game was in 24. It's a 13-10, 17-14 brawl where Michigan gets maybe a big run or two from Jordan Marshall. They force a few turnovers. Your quarterback has a sub 50% completion percentage, under 100 yards, doesn't throw any touchdowns, doesn't do a whole lot other than, not make serious mistakes. He plays a game like what Davis Warren played against Ohio State a few years ago, and even Davis Warren threw a few picks in that game. He was terrible. And Michigan wins. Scenario number 2, Bryce Underwood torches what is supposed to be a really good Oklahoma Sooners defense. He's accurate. He doesn't turn the ball over. And Michigan ends up losing on a last-second field goal, 31-28. Obviously dropping them in the rankings most likely, but losing to an Oklahoma team that made the playoff last year and is widely believed to be in the hunt for the playoff spot, maybe even for a conference championship here in 2026. In the long run, I'm not talking in the short term because losing never feels fun. In the long run, which one would we feel better about? To me, it would be the quarterback being productive. And that's why I'm going with fact on this. Because if Michigan loses to Oklahoma, I don't know of that many people in week 2 that are going to say, oh, this is Kyle Whittingham's fault. Oh, this is the coordinator's fault. Oh, there needs to be changes. Yes, I know how crazy Michigan fans are, and there will be people that say that. But what people are going to be paying attention to is the play of your quarterback. Because last year, in his first real start, first true road start against Oklahoma in Norman, he went out and looked like a deer in the headlights, as did your coaching staff, as did your offensive coordinator, right? If that happens again, the chorus of people clamoring for his backup, it's gonna come out in full force as early as week 2 if he doesn't play well. I think back to 4 years ago, and it was a much different situation because it was in the heart of the Harbaugh era, and the vibes were a lot better. I get it. But I remember when Michigan announced in 2022 that Cade McNamara was going to start the first game and J.J. McCarthy was going to start the second game. Now, the entire fan base wanted J.J. at that point. They did. And in week 2, Michigan played Hawaii, a vastly inferior opponent than Oklahoma, I acknowledge. But J.J. went out there, and I think on his first pass, he might have thrown a touchdown. If it wasn't his first, it was his second. He just went out there, balled out, and at that point, there was no doubt about who the starting quarterback was. What Michigan needs is a performance from Bryce Underwood against a legitimate opponent early in the season. He's going to have his opportunities to prove that there's no looking back in terms of who the starter is here. Because if he struggles, and this is just how it works at Michigan. It happened with Cade McNamara, it happened with Milton, it happened with Shea Patterson. For every struggle that they have against a quality opponent, they're going to start looking over their shoulder, and the pressure is going to get turned up. And there is a world where Michigan could lose that game to Oklahoma and still end up winning the fan base over by having a nice season in the Big Ten, beating Indiana. I don't see this happening, but maybe even going to Columbus and winning. The fact is, all their goals would still be in front of them if they lose that Oklahoma game, but the pressure that is all of a sudden on Bryce Underwood's shoulders, even if they win and he plays poorly, it's still going to be there. It's still at Michigan, it is a place where you don't need godlike offensive numbers from an offensive productivity standpoint, but you need stability. You need a guy who can sling it a little bit. You need a J.J. McCarthy. You need a guy who's money on third downs, who's going to make throws when it matters, who's going to move the chains and not make mistakes. Bryce needs to prove that he's that guy. If not, regardless of the result in the Oklahoma game, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. So that's my opinion. I'm going fact. We'll see what happens. Obviously, like I said, best of both worlds. He plays well or just well enough, and they win. But it is where I do like the new schedule, and I do like, the Big Ten being as expansive as it is. You play these tough games early in the season. These are not early season cupcakes. Like Oklahoma week 2, that's a legitimate opponent. This one at home as well, I think, makes a big difference. All right. When we return, it'll be time for our final segment. I'm going to be talking about some gambling stuff by our wonderful sponsors over at FanDuel. We will discuss that when we return.
Big Play Detroit is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, think you know who's hitting a homer today? Well, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. Joining the action is easy. Just make your free pick on who's hitting a home run in their game, and if you're right, you'll get a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. You've got nothing to lose and a lot to gain. And don't forget, you can make a free pick every day during the MLB season. It's just another reason why FanDuel is the home for home runs. So, are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com/BigPlay. That's FanDuel.com/BigPlay to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. 21 plus select states for Kansas and affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, 18 plus DC, Kentucky, Wyoming. No purchase necessary. Option in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amount. See terms at sportsbook.com/FanDuel. Gambling problem, 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777. Visit ccpg.org/chat for Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.com for Maryland. Visit gamblinghelpma.com. Call 1-800-327-5050 for Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. Text HOPE-NY for New York. Call 1-877-770-7867 for Louisiana.
All right, we are back. Final segment here on Big Play Detroit. And last week I talked about the over-under totals for Michigan football. This week, and probably next week or the week after, we're going to do our predictions in terms of their overall record. But this week I want to talk a little bit about Michigan State. Because, while the programs themselves are in drastically different places, and I think the expectations are drastically different. I think the over-under totals on FanDuel are a reflection of that. I think that both programs hired coaches that are going to fix a lot of basic things. And I talked about it with Michigan, but I think about it with Michigan State as well. Both programs, generally speaking, try to abide by similar identities. Michigan State wants physicality. They want toughness. I mean, let's be real. They want the teams that they saw in the heart of the D'Antonio era. Teams that ran the ball, teams that got stops, teams that got to the quarterback, defenses that forced turnovers. All of those were missing in the Jonathan Smith era and in the latter part of the Mel Tucker era, right? Those defenses got gashed. I mean, I remember when we were doing I'll Say This, coming on here and saying, like, Youngstown State was going for chunk plays against Jonathan Smith's defenses a year ago. And that's with a defensive coordinator in Joe Rossi, who I think is legitimately good, right? I just think that it was a combination of personnel, head coaching, and just the culture there not being what's expected at Michigan State. I bring this up because I think that there's a lot of basic things that need to exist at Michigan State that are going to exist under Pat Fitzgerald, just because he knows the Big Ten, he knows this program, and he knows how to motivate guys. And while I don't think that this is by any means going to be a great team or even that good of a team, I see them overshooting expectations just a little bit, because I don't think that the floor is nearly as low as it was a year ago. I would say last year was their floor. I don't see Fitzgerald ever having a team like that. And for that reason, I look on our wonderful FanDuel Sportsbook odds. And currently their over-under on wins is 3.5. I thought it'd be 4.5. It's 3.5. And currently the over is -158. So clearly, it's pretty popular. People have been, hammering that over. That's what I would go with. I would say over. I'm not going to say yet if I think that they're a bowl team right now, but currently -158 on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Over 3.5 wins for Michigan State. I mean, I thought last year's Michigan State team was about as bad a unit as they've had really in my lifetime. They still got over 3.5 wins. I mean, that, for as bad as they were, and I understand that, last year you didn't have Notre Dame on the schedule, right, which is not only a likely loss, but probably a likely beatdown in the early part of the campaign. Here's the prediction I'll make. Michigan State will win at least one game that they're not expected to win, just because I think that the culture's there. It's very similar to the early days of D'Antonio, where they had a 7-win season in year one. You look at it now and you say, oh, that's nothing. Who cares? At the time, it was a really big deal because they upset Penn State in the final game of the season. They didn't beat Michigan that year, but they were winning by 2 scores late in the game. It felt like, despite the record not being great, that they had fixed a lot of immediate problems that existed in the John L. Smith era. Now, from one John Smith to another, Pat Fitzgerald taking over, and I think that Michigan State gets the over 3.5 wins, -158 on the FanDuel Sportsbook. All right, on one take with no issues. Knock on wood. Good work today. All right, you can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014, TikTok at Chris Castellani, Instagram Chris Castle95, and of course all the Tiger Post games, which we only got about a month left of them, but we got Lions and Michigan stuff coming up. You can find at CastellaniContent.com, and I'll do this because Austin, you're usually the guy because I forget. I'm not gonna forget. Wow, I accidentally, wow. How about that? For the people at home, I accidentally muted my mic. So, wow, karma for saying that we had no issues today. My apologies. If you have an advertisement, a product, a company that you want us to promote, my DMs are open. Austin's DMs are open. We are open to negotiation. And one more thing I'll throw out there. I know it's fantasy football season. We've been having some good luck lately with recording cameos of people's draft order for the fantasy football season. You can find those as well. I'm promoting my cameo all the time on my socials as well. I've really been having a lot of fun with those. So you can check me out on all of those platforms. Austin, let's get your socials and let's get out of here.
You can follow me on X at Austin Sisler. You can follow me on Instagram at Austin Sisler _20. And then we will have a link in the description below for a GoFundMe for my family. Unfortunately, we just suffered a loss. My Aunt Angie passed away due to cancer. She leaves behind my Uncle Nick and their 4 beautiful young children. So if you could share that link or you're willing to donate to it, I know my family would greatly appreciate it.
Yep, and we have been promoting that. We promoted that at the end of last week's show as well, and that you can find on my socials. So, yep, I appreciate that. Hopefully doing a little bit of good during what's obviously a very horrific time. But that will do it for today's show. Thank you once again to Austin. Thank you to the people at Big Play. We will talk to you again next week. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. Peace and happiness.